Former President Trump maintains pretty large leads still over his Republican rivals for the party's 2024 presidential nomination as these indictments loom. The latest poll shows Mr. Trump with the support of 54% of likely GOP voters. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is in second with 17%, the only other candidate in the double digits. For more on all this, I want to bring in Republican strategist Boyd Matheson. He served as chief of staff to Senator Mike Lee of Utah and is a radio host in Salt Lake City. Good morning to you. As always, Boyd, nice to see you. So he's maintaining a commanding lead. We've got these two other looming indictments that likely could come down at any time. How will his supporters view these versus the indictments we saw in New York and in Florida, where he got a boost in not only the polls, but in fundraising?
Yeah, I don't think there'll be a big change in terms of the indictments coming down and what that will do on the high-level national kind of polls. There just doesn't seem to be an interest or an appetite for those voters having that an impact at all. We're actually seeing the same thing on the Democratic side in terms of the Hunter Biden probe that you were just discussing. People just aren't interested in that either. And so it's one of those interesting things that people do want to get down to the real issues of inflation. The economy seem to be the real top issues. And all of this indictment talk just doesn't seem to be a needle mover. Again, high level, I think once we start getting to Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina, actual votes and looking at delegates, I think things will begin to change a little bit. But for now, the high level polling is going to stay pretty much the same.
All right, let's talk about the issues, and the issues will be talked about at the first Republican debate, which is set for later on this month. It'll be many's first chance to see some of these candidates go face to face. How important will this debate be for the candidates who qualify?
Yeah, it is a big moment for a lot of those candidates. We always say that in the face of overwhelming similarities, even slight differences are perceived as more valuable. You can go down your potato chip aisle to test that theory. And so a lot of these candidates are going to be trying to test that theory. How can they differentiate on some of these core policies? How do they make sure they keep the base of the Republican Party together and appeal to that, but also have something unique that can be perceived as valuable so they can get that little lightning in a bottle moment to maybe capture some momentum moving past Labor Day and into the fall.
And do you think they welcome Trump being part of that debate, or would they be just as fine if he sat it out?
I think it's kind of mixed right now, Marni, to be honest. I think some would like the chance and relish the opportunity to go toe-to-toe with the former president. And I think there are some who maybe are more on that policy side who would love to have a debate that doesn't have a lot of distractions, a debate that really could be focused on the principles of the country and the policy that the country needs to actually move forward. So I think it's a little divided amongst those Republican potential candidates there. Some of them would love to go head-to-head and have that free-for-all cage match, and some of them would really like to have an elevated conversation. So we're still not sure whether the former president will show or not, and I'm not sure who's rooting for what at this point.
Yeah, and they're all looking to pick up a little bit of momentum. Governor DeSantis is now calling more attention to his blue-collar upbringing, his military service, given the fact that he's had a harder time gaining traction and seeing any sort of move of the needle. Should he have been playing this up sooner?
Most definitely. It's one of those things to talk about, hey, we're doing great in Florida. That doesn't really impact someone living in Iowa, New Hampshire, or South Carolina. So you have to get to the heart of those issues, and that is personal story. I think it's something Tim Scott has done very well. Nikki Haley's done a pretty good job of that. Vivek Ramaswamy clearly has the story to tell. I think a lot of the reset in the DeSantis campaign was they came in, cash flow covers a multitude of problems in a campaign, and I think we've seen that in the DeSantis campaign. They spent a lot of money. They've had to completely reset, reorganize their campaign staff, and now the messaging is coming back to a much more personal kind of story that hopefully will connect with the American people, because what they were doing before may have sounded nice to them, but it did not connect with the voters or with the people at large.
Republican strategist Boyd Matheson, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Marni.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.